and the Rolling Stones. I know this is the health program, but it's very healthy for the head.
It is.
If you can understand what we're talking about. Now, you were telling me a story, which I was already aware, but tell your story.
So I was at the Paul McCartney concert on Saturday night, and he told a story about one day in London, going back many, many years ago. They were him and a couple of the guys from the Rolling Stones, Mick and Keith. They were all standing outside a guitar shop, and they were chatting away about their I think they must have been 20, 21, something like that. And so the Beatles had just started to make it, but the Rolling Stones were still a covers band, so they hadn't had their first single yet. So the John and Paul said, well, we've got a song you can have, and gave them I Want to Be Your Lover Baby.
I want to be your
lover baby, I want to be your man.
She's not much help here, although we are doing healthy things, I guess.
Yes.
Now, we're talking about Christmas, New Year, the festive season.
Yeah.
Just to try and get into your head now that you do have to be a little bit careful.
You do.
Christmas, we all eat, we probably all drink a little bit more than we should.
Yes.
But if you can work out what you're having and think about it.
Yes.
And have a water after a beer.
Yeah, that's
maybe
right.
Wine or something like that.
And even thinking about the ingredients you're using, because sometimes you can be swapping healthy ingredients for unhealthy ingredients. So, for example, and sometimes recipes aren't going to work with these things. But for some things like salad dressings, you can easily swap, say, natural yogurt for cream. So natural yogurt being the better option.
Yeah.
Or if you're making, say, meringues and things, you can do it with xylitol instead of sugar. Do you know about xylitol?
Xylitol. No,
No,
it sounds like another planet.
Yeah, right.
somewhere.
So there's two natural sweeteners that are actually good for you. So you know how artificial sweeteners aren't great.
Yeah.
So aspartames and things like that. Where stevia is 50 times sweeter than sugar, and you only need a tiny touch of it. It's probably my preference, probably because I've got a sweet tooth, but you only need, for a coffee, you only need the tiniest bit on the end of a spoon. It takes time for your tongue to get used to the flavour, so a lot of people don't like it initially, but then get used to it. And xylitol has about the same sweetness of sugar, so if you have a teaspoon of sugar in your coffee, then you need a teaspoon of xylitol, but xylitol only has a GI of 7. So it has a low glycemic index.
Okay.
So you don't get the sugar burst, you don't get the insulin burst, you don't get the inflammatory burst. So therefore, sometimes our recipes we're making for Christmas, we can make them more healthier, especially for our diabetic relatives, by using stevia and xylitol instead of sugar.
And they'll still taste absolutely beautiful.
Well, I would make sure I checked out an ingredient. Because I use them all the time. So I make things,
It's not a sort of thing that people would say, oh, what did you put in that? I don't like I normally have sugar in there.
Yeah, well,
What
I
did you
think.
put in it?
Well, I think normally when people are cooking, they're doing the whole taste test, as I do, as they're cooking anyway. So, you'll know whether it's feeling about right and whether you need to adjust the recipe slightly. But so they're two things that are really quite healthy. The 5-2 diet, you've heard about that?
No.
So 5-2 diet is basically eating normally 5 days a week, but then doing a fast on 2 days per week. So there's been some study looking at it, because one of the things they're looking at is that intermittent fasting, which is what this is about, basically helps to regrow brain cells. So once again, how tired do you feel after a big meal? Exactly. Remember in the old days after Christmas, you'd just go into the lounge room and sit down and watch whatever was on the tube because you couldn't move.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was sort of like, so intermittent fasting, which is basically at least 12 to 14 hours without food. You can have water and stuff like that, but that actually starts stimulating brain cells growth.
I don't like the sound of that, though. I don't.
You don't like missing out on food?
No.
It's not that.
I might. I'll keep it. I'll keep it under my lap.
Yeah, it's sort of funny because the guy who started developing it around 5 years ago, he started releasing books, and he's got quite a few books. And basically in there, they're talking about basically on the fasting days having 500 calories. So they're not talking no calories, but then it's better to be the ones that balance insulin. So you're better off with protein or veggies, basically.
Right. So you can't really just have pie.
Well, your mum could have her half a kilo of prawns.
Yes,
half a kilo.
we'll
Yeah, half a kilo of prawns is only 500 calories, so she could have them through the day and.
Listen, when the Rolling Stones were on, we had a call from Jono.
Hey.
Now Jono's at Redland Bay, and he said, "I like that thought of eating the onion with the beer chaser." And I said, "Yeah, it's good." And he said, "That's what I love as well." And I thought, there's two of us now. That's been
I'm
good on
sure
you,
there'll be
Jono.
more of you out there, you onion beer eaters.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I love my onions. Love them. So, Jono, yes, have a lovely Christmas, mate, and we'll share an onion together. Forget it. What else should we be aware of?
So I think making sure that I think people should weigh themselves before Christmas,
Yes.
because a lot of people avoid the scales all year round. So I think you need to know what you weigh before Christmas so that you can keep an eye on your weight throughout Christmas. So if you do put on 1, 2, 3 kilos, you might still fit into all your clothes, but that can be the difference between a point or two in BMI, which can start that inflammatory process once again. So basically, I think that we need to be weighing ourselves at least once a week over the Christmas period and making sure you get back down to your pre-Christmas weight as quickly as possible.
That is a great idea.
Yeah.
Yes, take your weight before Christmas, or start now. Take
Yeah.
it now, because
Yeah.
I think next week's going to be a bit of a party
It's the
week.
start.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
take your weight and then check it. I don't know. After New Year.
And the waist is another measurement. So anyone who, I think I've said this before, but what you need to do with your waist is suck in your waist and then measure it. And for girls that needs healthy weight, should be under 32.5 inches. Men should be under 34.5 inches. That's a sucked in waist. And just make sure that doesn't change. Because you can imagine a lot of the weight we put on initially is fluid. Because
Right,
fluid
yeah.
will dilute the toxins, it will dilute the sugars, it will dilute the inflammatory hormones from eating too much rubbish and that sort of thing. So the fluid is something that will happen, but the longer the body stays toxic, the
Yep.
more likely we are to develop fat to store the toxins.
And then you try and get rid of it.
That's
Whoa,
right.
That's a
So
drama.
it's just really well worth keeping an eye on it, because if we're not keeping an eye on it and we still fit in our clothes, we're not going to know about it.
Yeah.
So it's just about knowledge and information and, being empowered.
Well, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're talking about Christmas and enjoying it too.
Yeah.
There's a couple of little secrets coming out here.
Yeah.
One or two. We might just take a break for a moment. We'll be back shortly.
Beautiful.
17 to 12.